Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tea and Tarot. Thank you so much for your patience when I was away in October, traveling through Greece and Cyprus and Turkey. And while I was traveling, we just, saw so many wonderful things, had such a good time, but it meant that it was not possible for me to do this class because there was a 10-hour time difference. And so I wouldn't have been able to be here on time. Or rather, it would have been like I would have had to be at, dark o'clock in the morning in order to try and do this. And so I just skipped 1 month, but now we're back. And today we are going to be covering questions and how to frame our questions for readings. And this is for using either a tarot deck, or it can also be for using an oracle deck or any other type of divination device you have. But typically, we're going to be kind of looking into how to frame questions that are, going to give us more rich and deep answers, as opposed to questions that are going to give us comparably shallow answers. So one of the things that I've noticed over the years as a reader is that people, when they come to me, often don't even know how to frame their question because of lots of different reasons. First reason that they might not know how to frame the question is just that there's so much going on that they feel overwhelmed and they're just like, I don't even know where to start. Another reason why folks might have, I'm going to just switch my spotlight onto this while I'm talking, so for the video. When I find that, another reason that people might not know how to ask the question is because the question is so sensitive that they're kind of nervous to ask it, and then they tiptoe around the question. And related to that is questions where the person is self-shaming for having asked the question in the first place. Like, for example, people coming to me and being like, well, I really want to know about, I'm sure everyone says this, but like love, and even just in the energy with which they're asking the question, they're kind of a little bit shaming themselves, or they somehow feel like asking about love, which is like one of the most important topics in one's life, that it's somehow a silly question or a bad question to ask. So that sense of, not being sure how to bring up a sensitive subject, and also that sense of not being sure how to frame a question that they have already judged to be silly or commonplace, or that they just are judging themselves in some way for asking. The third reason that people have a hard time framing their question is because a reading is a process oriented and kind of rich contextual experience, not a mere yes or no. If you want a simple yes or no, a coin toss is free to do at home. You don't need to go see a reader for that. But a lot of times people will come and ask me yes or no questions to start off their reading. And it's one of my jobs to try to then take that yes or no question and unpack it a little bit so that the reading that we're about to do will actually be able to deliver the substantive information that will help the person realize that the simple yes or no that they're seeking is actually their own decision to make. And if they want to make that decision, what would be the steps to making it? And what would be the conditions that would need to be met in order for them to feel good about their decision? So those are the three things that we're going to kind of work through today. And then we're going to have a little bit of space for if anyone thinks of other reasons why someone might have a struggle to ask a particular question. So let's start with the first part, going to the question that the person just feels so overwhelmed because there's been so much change, or the problem or issue at hand is so big that they don't even really know how to begin. And this can manifest in a couple different ways. One way that it will manifest is in the person kind of going down the road of sharing the entire big story of what's been going on in their life. And as a reader, you have choices about how you're going to approach that. Some of us are willing to do the emotional labor of listening and holding space for someone else's story in a reading. And some of us might think, well, we only have like a half an hour here. We got to really like move through it to get you answers. And then we might think, I'm not really super inclined to hear the whole story. Either way, there's no wrong answer here. If you want to be a deep listener as part of your service in offering a reading, then it's totally fine to do that. My recommendation to you would be then either that you only offer 1 hour readings or longer, or that you tell people right in the beginning of the reading, okay, this is how I'd like to break our time down. I'd like to offer you some time to share. And let's say that's like the next 10 minutes or so. And then after that, I'd like to make sure that we have at least 20 minutes to do the reading, so that you don't end up having the person being like, well, I paid for half an hour of a reading. And then you having to say, yeah, that included the time, the 15 or 20 minutes that you spent talking. Because you don't want people to feel like they've not gotten their money's worth from the reading if you're charging, and you also want to make sure that they do feel heard. So I've experimented all over the block with this because, I've had the experience of having people sit down and think that the reading starts from the minute I deal the cards, as opposed to the minute that they sit down. So I'm pretty clear when I'm seeing people in person or online that, this is the time that we're allotted. And I use a scheduling program so that the person gets a confirmation and they're shown this is exactly how long of a time we'll be spending together. If you book this type of session versus a shorter session, then it's really clear. It's in the calendar. We've got 30 minutes together, or we've got, 50 minutes together, or we've got a 90 minutes to 2 hours together. And then helping somebody who is feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. It's been so much. I'll usually try to kind of, instead of having the person feel like they need to share with me the entire story in a linear way, if somebody says, well, I just feel like it's so much, I'll say, I'm going to try to get as much into your reading as we possibly can. Why don't you pick the most important thing and we'll start there. And then we can unpack as we go along. And sometimes that will mean the person will say, well, like, let's say, for example, somebody went through a divorce and now they've had to move, and they're not sure if they're going to stay at their job or if they need to get a different job, and they're uncertain about what's going to happen with their dog. Those are like a bunch of related things, right? So if I'm going to do a reading for somebody with that kind of a question where there's lots of different aspects all hinging on a core situation, then I might do my wheel of life spread, or you can look up online. There's a spread called the horoscope spread that's pretty common, that has a similar kind of pattern to it. But that spread basically allows me to look at a central theme in the person's life and how that theme is going to impact their relationships, their home, their finances, their connections, their personal growth and well-being, their health and happiness. And then there's also an aspect of that spread that allows you to look at kind of what's emerging from the shadows into the light over the next year that will give them a bigger picture, a broader perspective of where they might be like a year from now. And so then that helps them see, okay, that's what I'm aiming for. This is now we're going to look at how we're going to get there. But sometimes somebody comes with so many different things that are all happening at once. My dog died. My mom is in the hospital. I'm having trouble at work. And I went to the doctor and they said that I've got the first stages of an ulcer. Arguably, all of those things are related to the central theme of stress, but what are you going to say to somebody? Yeah, you're stressed. That's not much of a reading. So you're going to want to then be able to unpack each of those questions and give each of those issues its own space. So usually, depending on the emotional state of my querent, I will either start with what is the most intimate to them. So in this situation, I might say, we're going to go in order of your health, your mom, your dog, and your job. And we're going to look at these things in turn, because we can't even begin to look at what's going to happen with your job until we know about your health. Or if the querent is like, I just feel like these things have caused me to have so much stress and I don't know how to like get on top of my life again. And I know if I could just get on top of things, this ulcer would go away. Then I'll say, okay, let's start with your mom, your dog, your job. And then we'll look finally at your health, because we know that some of these things, once addressed, will eliminate some of the stress. And then we can look at how you're going to optimize your health and your healing process. But we know that you're going to need to like set some strong boundaries, or you're going to need to get some assistance, or you're going to need to look for a new job or whatever. So with regards to the querent feeling overwhelmed by the buffet of topics that they want to bring to the table, one of your jobs as a reader is to help them identify sometimes exactly what the issues are that they need you to look at, and to put them in order in a way that the querent feels like each part is digestible. So whether you're doing like a wheel of life or horoscope spread, if you're doing that holistic kind of a spread where you're looking at the person's whole life, you're going to break that down into little bite-sized digestible pieces. First, we're going to look at your family situation. Then we're going to look at your health and your happiness. Then we're going to look at your relationship. Then we're going to look at your work. Then we're going to look at the, bigger picture. Or if you're doing a spread, so you're breaking it down into these like little pieces, so that rather than talking in a big spiral of like all things mixed in everywhere, you're kind of going methodically through different areas of the reading. That can help an overwhelmed querent feel like what you've basically done is taken a big basket full of tangled yarn, and you've untangled it, and you've rolled each piece of yarn into its own tidy little ball. And now they can look at that basket, and it has the red and the blue and the green and the yellow yarn, and they're able to see the whole perspective, and they don't feel so overwhelmed by it. Where you can go really wrong as a reader, if you really want to help somebody whose mind is all tangled like that, is if you get into the tangle with them. And now you're like, well, there's this about this, and there's that about that, but then we'll go back to this, and where it goes all over the place. So your best kind of tool in that situation is for you to organize your reading around the major thematic arcs that the person is facing. Now, sometimes people won't give you a lot of information about, why they are experiencing what they're experiencing or what's going on. Sometimes they're just like, oh, I'm just feeling like there's so much going on. I want to see what you have to say about it. I don't want to tell you much. I've typically said to a querent in that situation, we have, 30 minutes or an hour together. You are a vast and timeless being. I could probably talk at length about all the different things that I'm going to be able to see in this reading, but I'm not sure that that's going to be the most helpful thing. If there are areas that you want to make sure we land on, please tell me, because that's going to impact how I lay the cards down, what spreads I choose to use. So when we're at that point in a reading and we have, a kind of bigger picture, we do know what those thematic arcs are, then we're able to really piece out the different parts and untangle those threads with the querent. You will walk away from that reading feeling great because you've been able to give very complete and thorough counsel for each of the different aspects that they brought to the table to be analyzed. And they will walk away feeling grateful that a kind, smart person helped them untangle all the thoughts that they were carrying in a big basket around in their minds. So that's, on the subject of overwhelm. Now let's talk, the overwhelmed querent. Now let's talk about the subject of the person who is afraid to bring up exactly what they're experiencing, whether that's that they don't, they're embarrassed, or they feel like it's too sensitive, or maybe they're afraid you'll judge them, maybe they're judging themselves, maybe they feel like the topic is very intimate, maybe they are ashamed of their question. As a reader, you never want to have to feel like you're pulling someone's teeth out to get them to come and, participate in their own reading. Obviously, they sought you out for a reading because they want a reading. And if they then are hesitating to share with you what the reading is going to be about, it doesn't mean you can't still give them an effective general reading that will address the questions that they have. It just means that it's possible that you could help them even more if you had the specific question. Now, there are different schools of thought about this. Some people would prefer not to hear any question at all, but then that means that they're pretty much only ever going to be using one spread to answer everything. I myself have designed spreads that answer specific types of questions, like relationship questions and family questions, financial questions, questions about thematic arcs that happen through one's life. I've been through a lot of different types of readings over the years, and I've designed spreads that answer the questions that come up the most frequently. And I do want to use those because those spreads will give me really specific information and really specific direction that might help the querent. So in that case, the sensitivity with which you can approach your querent is going to help them unlock and share some of what they want to say. So for example, if somebody sits down and they say, yeah, I just wanted to know about a particular person. I just want to know, am I on the right track? That could mean so many things. That could be a workplace relationship. It could be, am I on the right track to ask my boss for a raise? It could mean my romantic relationship. It could mean someone I'm thinking about going into business with. It could mean a friend. There's so many ways that could go. So having a spread that will allow you to look at a variety of different types of relationships is important. And I have a relationship spread that I've designed. It shows the querent, the other person, what's working in the querent's favor in this situation, or what are the positive aspects, what are the negative aspects or obstacles, the shorter term outcome, the longer term outcome, and then what does the querent need to think about or do in order to make the most of that outcome. So when we have, a context like that, that can work for a wide variety of different types of relationship readings. And you are certainly able to use that spread to give a reading that's going to give the querent some very helpful answers about the relationship dynamic. It looks like you are the King of Swords and this other person is the Moon reversed. Seems like there's some ambiguity where you're trying to seek clarity. The other person isn't maybe giving you full answers. Maybe you feel decisive and the other person doesn't. That could apply to, I want to ask my boss for a raise. It can apply to, are we going to be in a committed relationship or not? It can apply to, is this a good friend for me or not? But one of the things that you can say to somebody who says something very general to you is to say, okay, it sounds like you are wanting me to look in on a particular dynamic, and I'd like to know, because it will influence how I go about the reading, is this a romantic or non-romantic dynamic? That way, at least you kind of have a sense of what you're dealing with, so that you're not talking about asking your boss for a raise when what the person is actually asking for is, will this person and I get together? Similarly, in questions related to love, sometimes people will just say, well, I just want to know about love. And that again can mean so many things. So sometimes when somebody says, I just want to know about like love, like now and in the future, I'll say, well, is there a particular person in mind that you'd like us to look into, as well as looking at more generally at love? Or would you like us to look more generally at love? That way I'm giving the querent the choice and the freedom to say, well, yeah, there's a particular person, in which case I'll use my relationship spread. But if they say, well, no, I just want to look more in general. Okay, in that case, then I'm going to look at something more like a past, present, future, or a Celtic cross, or something similar that's going to give me a bigger picture on what is this person's relationship situation like now and going to be in the future? What are some of the things for them to be on the lookout for in their personality or their, way of being? In regards to somebody who's feeling like they're deliberately not wanting to tell you their question because they are afraid they're going to influence the outcome, sometimes your querent will say, something to the effect of, well, I don't want to like influence it too much, so I'm not going to tell you anything. I just want you to tell me what you see. It's totally fine to work that way with a querent. If that's what they want, they can have that. I usually will just sort of kindly, but with a smile, but like also a little seriously be like, well, I want you to know that if I do a general reading for you, it's totally fine. And you will probably come up with some very helpful information. As we go along in this reading, if there is anything that comes up that's related to a more specific question you might be holding in your heart, please do let me know, because we can look more deeply at that. And the more you share at that point, the more specific I can get in my answers with you. Because again, like I can be saying, there's somebody in your circle. I see here, there's somebody in your circle who's not trustworthy. And the person is thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to know. Is this person trustworthy or not? And so then I can say, all right, if we go a little deeper, this situation looks like you and this person have had this situation or this dealing, and how that went down wasn't really something that made you feel very good. And now that you're on the other side of it, you're looking back and you're reflecting with some regret about maybe what you shared or decisions you made or how you included them in major parts of your life. And so now we're going to look at not so much the trustworthiness of the person or not anymore. We're going to look at how you can heal from the regret that you have around dealing with this person, or how you're going to extricate yourself from dealing with this person, which is a whole different situation than just sitting there and talking about this other person whose character, maybe isn't up to par for the whole reading. So giving the querent opportunities along the way in a more general reading, especially if they've been shy to share with you what's going on, to say, here's what I see here. And would you like to reflect on that at all? Does that resonate for you? Is there anything you'd care to share with me about that? Would you like us to look at this a little bit more deeply? That's going to give them a little bit of footing to kind of get into the reading and share a little more. And hopefully by then, you've built the trust in the reading by sharing what you've seen, that they know that they can say, okay, yeah, I want to talk about this particular thing. Because honestly, we're here to help people. And sometimes when people don't share with us what they need help with, it limits our ability to help. I have one more note on how to cope with a querent who's reluctant to ask a specific question or reluctant to share. Sometimes it's a matter of confidentiality, and they're afraid they've maybe been holding something within for so long, or maybe they're in an abusive situation, or they're in a situation where they're so afraid to give voice to what's going on that they are keeping it secret. In that case, one of the things you can do is, if you sense that the querent is holding back either because of judgment, shame, or fear of being judged, or fear of their own safety, one thing you can do is to say, I am 100% confidential. I will never tell anybody what you're going to share here today. And if you are ready to let go of any story or a life situation that you've been carrying around or living in that has hurt you, I am here to help you lift that off your shoulders, put it down, and walk away from it. And so that assurance, assurance, there's the word, the assurance that you can give them that A, they're safe, B, it's confidential, and C, that what you really want to help them do is transform the situation, can sometimes open the door so that the querent will feel like they can share a little bit more. And then you might get some of the story like, oh, well, my husband has cheated on me and now is threatening to take our child if I tell anyone or leave him. That's one that I've heard. Or, my boss hit on me and I'm really worried about my job and I don't really know where to go for help. Okay, I've heard that one too. So as you go through your readings, being able to, offer the querent, that safety, that sanctuary, so that they can really open up and share that question. Sometimes all it takes is acknowledging that, hey, some stuff seems like it's really hard to talk about, especially if we're not sure if somebody's confidential. I want you to know that this is a confidential space, and that if there's anything that's been troubling you that you want to lift off your shoulders, I'm here to help you lift it and help you transform it. So in the matter of the self-effacing client who is like, I am just like curious about love. I'm sure everybody asks about that. I'm just like, it's probably stupid, but you're watching this person automatically already disinclude or discount or dismiss their own emotional needs. Number one, that tells you something about the querent that you're dealing with. That this is somebody who is so afraid of having their emotional needs judged that they prejudge their emotional needs before anyone else has a chance to. And that they're even sitting here in this incredibly vulnerable situation with you, judging themselves in case you might judge them. Like, what tarot reader, I'm just saying, what tarot reader on earth does not want to hear a love question? It's one of the things that we usually are really good at helping people sort out complicated situations, dynamics, relationships. It's one of the things that a lot of us specialize in. So especially for me, like that's one of the biggest areas that I have ever gone down, the road of, is love questions and relationship questions. So when somebody is self-effacing this way, the first thing your job is going to be to help that person understand that there is no judgment here. So when the person's like, it's so cliche, but I just want to know about love. Even it's like, I can even see people's faces over the years saying that, like, I just want to know about, and they look up, or they like look to the side. They feel so embarrassed to ask. A great way to diffuse that is to be like, oh, my favorite kind of question. Never be ashamed to ask that question. That's the question that we love to answer around here. This is like great. I love relationship questions. Let's talk about love. And then I actually have a quote that I use in these situations, and I have it here. I actually have a love quote. There's this quote by the poet Hafiz that says, the subject tonight is love. Let's see. Hafiz, the subject tonight is love. And it's a short poem. It's really a wonderful one. This is going to take me to a book. It's a short little, this isn't what I want. And now it's not letting me out. Really? Give me 1 second. I have it memorized, but I still am wanting to quote it exactly. Okay, here we go. It's a great quote. The subject tonight is love, and for tomorrow night as well. As a matter of fact, I know of no better topic for us to discuss until we all die. So this is amazing Hafiz, Persian poet, wrote this poem. The subject tonight is love. It's short, it's sweet, and it immediately helps to counter people's inhibitions about asking you about this one amazing thing in life, especially when they're self-judging. The other thing you're going to need to do right away is to understand that this is a person who's got some wounding around love, so much so that they're afraid to even ask about it, but they desperately want to ask you about it. So handling their love question with the utmost delicacy is going to be the better part of valor for a sensitive reader. When you have this kind of a situation where somebody is, self-effacing around love, you can quote the Rumi or the Hafiz poem. You can go in, and say to them, oh, my favorite subject. You can also say, love is such an important and sensitive subject that sometimes it feels like it's scary to even ask about it. And I certainly understand why you might feel shy to ask about it. Just address it directly. But I want you to know that this is such an important question, and we're going to look at it together, and we're going to see how love moves through your life. And let's look at love related to family and friends, and let's also look at love related to romance and relationships. And let's also maybe look at self-love. And then you could easily just draw a card for the querent, a card for family and friends, a card for romantic relationships, and a card for self-love. And that way, the querent doesn't then need to feel so embarrassed for asking about romantic love, because you're addressing love. And then you're able to show them you have this great love in your life. It shows that you've got some really great friends. Let's say you get a 3 of Cups. You've got really some great friends around you, people who genuinely love you. They really want to celebrate your joy in the world. And so whenever you feel sensitive about love, you do have these friends who are willing to listen and willing to go there with you. Never feel afraid to talk to the people who love you the most and care for you the most about your apprehensions or your fears about love. And it's possible with that Three of Cups that through your friends, you're going to meet a partner. So by contextualizing romantic love or any type of love within the, bigger picture of all the different types of love, people will sometimes relax, and then they can kind of open up and share, because then they might be like, yeah, it's just, I went through this really bad breakup and it's been like 10 years and I kind of feel like I've forgotten how to date, and I feel like I've forgotten how to have, significant connections with people. And that's very real. That's something that I've done lots of readings on that subject, where people were like, it's been so long that I wouldn't even know how to get back into it. So by giving that bigger picture view, you give them the chance to sort of bring up that more sensitive subject. And then again, with your same level of sensitivity and awareness, you say, well, I can completely understand why, after having been kind of out of the dating game for a long time, you might feel like it's, a little intimidating. I think, you have every right to, to feel that way. But I also want you to know that it is like riding a bicycle, and you won't forget how to love. You'll never forget how to love if you've ever loved. So let's look and see, how will you feel the most comfortable to get back into that world? And then you can take their question, what about love, and make it more substantial. What does this person need to know about the journey to getting back into a relationship? It can be about them, their own habits and behaviors. It can be about set and setting. It can be about how to see the right person and how to know it's the right person. It can be about what kinds of qualities and characteristics they might want to look for in a partner, and what kinds of qualities and characteristics they bring to a relationship. And through that, you can get much more kind of deep answers that are genuinely going to help someone a lot more than just saying, well, just hang out 6 months from now, you'll meet somebody. You can say, well, on your journey to preparation, here's some things to think about. And as you're getting back into relationship, here are some things to be on the lookout for, good and bad. And when you do find yourself making a good connection with somebody and you want to see it thrive, here are some things that you might want to consider. And that's going to give them a sense of empowerment in how they approach this. But a lot of the time, the people who need that advice the most are going to be the ones who are like, I guess, like, I want to know about love, but like, I'm sure everybody asks that. That's the person who you really need to go deeper with. But a lot of times, if they try to brush it off like that, you're going to feel tempted as a reader to go along with their energy and just like, oh, okay, well, it looks like you're going to meet somebody. So, don't worry. It's not a silly question, but you can go so much deeper with it. Okay. Part 3, the person who brings you a yes or no question. And you're just sort of like, okay, we've got like the next 30 minutes to talk about this yes or no question, and I can answer yes or no. We could just flip a coin right here. But where you really want to give them a bigger, broader perspective on the situation at hand. So if somebody comes and they say, well, I get this new job. Will I get this new situation? Will I, am I going to ever have children? Whatever it is. I do get a lot of people who sit down and they get sometimes a little nervous, and so they reach for a yes or no question, because it's their core question. Like, will I ever get married and have babies is one that comes to me a lot. Or I really want to get a different job. Am I going to be able to get a different job? So as a reader, you can sort of take that question in hand and say, okay, so I usually repeat it back to the querent. I say, well, it sounds like you're asking if love is on the menu for the future. And it sounds like we want to know about, the road to marriage and family, and if that's in your destiny. So it sounds like, we might want to look in on what would be the factors that you need to be aware of that will lead you to that situation. We might want to look at what are the main lessons for you to be learning right now so that you'll be ready for it when it comes. We want to look at the past and see, A, if there's anybody from the past who might be coming back, B, if there's anything that's happened in the past that might be blocking you from going forward. We want to look at where you're at right now, and we want to see if there's a timeline that's available of if it's going to happen, when is it going to happen? And we probably want to be looking at what do you need to do to be ready? So obviously, all that complex of questions around the initial yes or no question are going to have a lot deeper answers than just plain yes or no. And they're going to allow you to utilize the time with your querent to ensure that they feel prepared, not just that they're, because it's like half of what's going to need to happen is going to need to arise from within them. Similarly to if someone's asking, will I be able to get a different job? You can't just, if they say, well, I want to leave my job and get a different job, will I get a different job? You don't necessarily want the question to be, well, sure, yeah, you're going to get a different job, looks like next year. What if they never send a resume because the job is just showing up? So, saying, okay, like with the job question, sounds like you're looking for changing your career, changing your job. Sounds like we want to know, are you going to be doing a similar job? Are you going to be doing a different job? What is the pay going to be like? What kind of pay should you be looking for? What kind of maybe benefits package might you ask for? If there's any tips to give you around the application or interview process, if there's any geographic region that you might want to look into, that might be better if you're thinking about a move for work. Sounds like we want to know about, how a change in work would impact your comfort. Will it require different things of you? And again, you present them with the kind of buffet of different types of questions that you can ask. And then often a querent will be like, well, yeah, like I don't want to move, but yeah, like everything else. Or they might be like, well, then they might reveal, like, I'm actually interviewing for a job right now, and I actually want to know if I'm going to get that one, which is a lot different question. Am I going to get this job? Then I want to change my job. What's going to happen? So through offering some potential questions to your querent in lieu of a simple yes or no response, you can kind of get down below the surface a little bit. And again, as a reader, part of what you're there to do is to help that querent figure out how to move their energy and make their decisions in such a way that will yield the best possible outcome to their highest and, best, their highest good, let's say. So in this process of doing the next kind of steps with a yes or no question, you bring more questions to the table. You can analyze the question through a past, present, future lens. You can analyze it through the Celtic cross. You can analyze it through a reading of your own design, even and especially if you offered that querent a few specific questions about the nature of the transformation they want to make or the goal that they want to achieve. And then you can just walk through the reading with them and be like, well, so what it's saying is that on the timing is this, in terms of, where to look, it's saying you want to look at something either, north, south, east, or west, or that you want to look at something that's online, or you want to, depending on the card that comes up there, you'll have different answers. Sometimes you will just get like a wheel of fortune and it'll be like, what this is saying is that you might just wait for a little while and see if somebody comes and recruits you. But more often than not, someone's going to have to exert a little bit of interest or effort in order to make something happen. So it's not frequent that you're only going to have that one answer, which is just sit back, relax, and wait for it to happen. More of the time, it's going to be, here are some steps that you might want to take to yield the best success in this journey. And if somebody, here's a big fear of a reader, is that somebody comes and says, am I going to get this job? I had this one recently. Am I going to get this job? It showed that everything was going really, really well, that the person, had done well in the interview. We had a Knight of Swords, good communication, strong, was, authoritative. We had, a Knight of Pentacles that was a hard worker, had good references. There was a whole bunch of cards that were very favorable, but the outcome card was the Justice card. And I was like, well, and this is a person who was looking for a job in a field related to social justice. And I was like, ooh, this Justice card is tricky, because on the one hand, it could mean that, yes, you're going to go forward and get this job in this social justice field, right? But it also shows the scales. And that can also mean that there's somebody whose qualifications would outweigh this person, regardless of how well this person performed in the process. So I said, well, what it looks like in this reading is that right now you are doing a great job in this interview process. You have shown admirable qualities. They feel like you really know what you're doing. You have impeccable references. There is still a possibility that somebody else could have greater qualifications. And I want you to know that if you, for some reason, don't get this job, it is because there was somebody who just had, more qualifications than you did. And if you do get this job, then yay, all systems go. But if you don't, please don't go down the road of thinking that you didn't earn it or that you weren't good enough, because it's not that. It's just that you're up against stiff competition. So sure enough, the person came back a couple weeks later and said, I went through 4 interviews. I had to bring back 3 sets of references. In the end, they went with someone else. I'm pretty bummed out, but I now know that it wasn't because of my lack in any way. It was really just that they had somebody who was more qualified and had more experience. And it's okay. I'm going to keep trying. That's your best possible outcome when you've given a yes or no answer. And when the answer is like, it looks like a strong yes, but there's this little element. And so being able to leave room in the reading, that there are when you're reading for someone, you're reading for them. You're not reading for everybody around them, because we're not spies, right? So we're not like looking at every other person they're up against in this competitive process. We're looking at them and how they're doing and how they're performing. So always make sure, in the case with a yes or no question, that even if there's a strong yes, but a possibility of no, or a strong no, but with a possibility of yes, that you're upfront about that you say, so far, it looks like this. There is a wild card over here that indicates this may change. If it changes, this is why it would change. It's not that it would change because you're bad or whatever. At the same time, you're still sometimes going to feel super confident. All systems are go. Yes, 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 yes. And then everything falls apart at the last minute. In my experience, that has typically been because either the querent was lying to me about the question, which has happened, or someone was lying to them about the information at hand. And so they were going based on information that was false. B, it can mean that something intruded at the last minute, an unforeseen circumstance came along and changed the dynamic. And that's not something that we will always be able to see. In fact, some of our greatest lessons in life come because we thought we were sailing along and knew everything about everything, and then life threw us a curveball. So as a reader, you're not always going to see every curveball that's destined for your querent. That's sometimes not your job. But to still, nonetheless, it is a blow to our ego when somebody comes and says, you were wrong. You said this was going to happen and it didn't, or you said this wasn't going to happen and it did. How could you have been wrong? The best thing to do if you deal with a situation in a yes/no question where you get the answer wrong is to just be humble about it, to be like, everything looked so positive and so promising, or, it really showed this particular trajectory. It does seem like this has changed. I'd be curious to know if there's anything that changed along the way, or if anything happened differently than it seemed like it was going. And I usually will say to the person, I'm so sorry that I got that wrong. And, I'm pretty good, but I'm not always 100% perfect. If you'd like, I'd love to offer you a free reading to make up for the fact that I got this wrong. And that's about all you can do, is to say to somebody, here, let me make good on it. I got this wrong. You came to me for advice. You entrusted me with your question. I did my best. And we both did our best. And obviously something took a turn here. Let me make it up to you. Let's have another reading, and I'll give it to you for free of charge on me, to see if we can help make sense of what's happened here. Sometimes people won't tell you and they'll just be mad. That's okay. That's okay too. It happens. In my experience, it's interesting. I read an article, and I'll have to go back and find it and see if I can share it in this group. I read an article about the frequency of the Pythia's predictions at the Oracle at Delphi. Let's see, Oracle at Delphi predictions. I feel like this was in like Forbes magazine or like The Economist. It was in one of these like business magazines. It's not here. I'll find the article and send it to you and put it into this group. But it basically talked about the frequency that the oracle was correct versus the time she was not correct. And the percentage was, something like, I don't know, somewhere between like 70 and 80% of the time she was correct. Let's say it might have been in the 60s, but I think it was, it was actually a pretty high number, like in the 70% plus range. And what this article was saying is that in the business world, the people who do the financial forecasting based on trends that they see would love to have that number of accuracy of being correct. That most of the time, all of the systems that we use to try to predict behavior, up to and including algorithms, still have flaws in them, and they still get things wrong. There's no reason to believe as a reader that your algorithm is going to be flawless. You have to allow for flaws in your own algorithm as a reader, that you're going to sometimes get things wrong, and that particularly the risk is higher in a yes or no type situation. So in helping your querents to shape their questions to you, the things to really keep in mind, just in little summary here are, and then we're going to do a little exercise. So if you've been sleeping on me, get ready. We're going to frame some questions, but the things we want to keep in mind, the kind of most common types of hard to answer questions are the questions where someone feels so overwhelmed that they don't even really know how to ask it. The questions in which someone is embarrassed or shy or reluctant to share what's really going on, and yes or no questions. So let's now take a minute and think about how we would frame certain types of questions. So what I'd love to do, if there's anybody, maybe put a little yes in the comments if you're willing to try this exercise with me, or you can bring yourself off of mute, or, put yourself on screen and give me a little wave. I'm gonna unspotlight myself so that if others want to participate, you can. But basically, let's say somebody came and asked you a question related to, they said something like, I just feel like, I feel like everything's been all over the place. Like, I changed my major, my boyfriend and I broke up. I'm feeling like I want to move because I've been like having this roommate situation. And I just feel like I don't even know where to start. How might you, as a reader, what might you say back to that querent to help them reframe their question in a way that feels less overwhelming and more manageable? Go ahead, and if you want, you can either type it into the comments and I'll read it, or you can bring yourself off of mute and I'm happy to hear what you have to say. If not, I'll just do this one example and then we'll close for the day. And I'll give a minute here in case anybody's typing. Okay, yeah, Tara says, thinking still, no problem. Take a second and just think about, I want to change my major. I think I need to move. My boyfriend and I broke up. I just feel like everything is like all over the place. I don't even know where to start.
So I don't know if this is right or not.
Try it.
Yeah. My instinct would be to ask them if they were to think about these things or feel into these things right now, is there any one thing that pops up first? Or was there something that set this off that they can think of, was that kind of a thing? I don't know if that's right or not.
Yeah, no, those are two great approaches, Tara. Thank you for sharing. The first approach of giving them a little bit of freedom to prioritize in a very spontaneous way, where you say, what kind of these three things, like which one feels like it's the biggest, right? Or which one pops up the biggest or the most for you? That gives them a chance to tell you, like, okay, I just feel like maybe it's my breakup. Okay, so then you kind of can say from there, okay, you know what? Let's look at that relationship and what it was there to teach you and why did that happen that way? And then let's look at kind of how you're going to frame your future. And then you can address the other things, the move, the major, everything else. The other way that you just said was, if you had to, let's see, how did you frame it? You said,
did something pop up first, and I would want to leave open there.
That's right.
Maybe it was none of these things that they're coming to me with, but did something set the whole thing in motion?
That's a great way to look at it. Say, did something happen and then this started, all of this started? Because it's entirely possible that, with or without your own reading, there was a precipitating event that occurred before all of this, that led to it. If the querent then comes back, for example, and says, well, it's actually that like my roommate and I got really drunk and we ended up hooking up, and my boyfriend broke up with me because of that. And now I'm not going to drink anymore. And I'm thinking about changing my major so that I can study psychology, so I can become a counselor. That's going to be like its whole own thing. And you're going to be like, whoa, okay, let's go to that then, and that's going to take you into a much deeper level. So I think that's a great approach. Thank you for being brave and for sharing that. All right, let's try and let's have a look here. That's what I was thinking, what may have set those things into motion. Yeah, it's a great way to kind of open that up and help the querent feel less overwhelmed by the enormity of it all, and to go to a moment in time and to start there. All right, let's try another one. So now let's try one where somebody's like, oh, like, I guess, like, I don't know, I thought about coming to this reading, and I guess I just really want to look at like career and love, like, probably the things everyone asks about. So yeah, career and love. So what do you say to that querent? How do you help that querent in that moment when they say career? Probably the things everybody asks about, career and love. I guess love and money is just like what everyone asks about. You're probably so tired of answering that. What do you say to that querent? And I'll give a minute here. And again, feel free to type into the chat or to bring yourself off mute and share some thoughts. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Tara, go right ahead. Whoever wants to, this is open forum.
Okay, so first of all, I would reassure that person who seems very insecure about asking that these are wonderful major life issues, and it's really important. Some of my favorites to discuss, as you just highlighted. But again, just my instinct asks me if these two are connected. They're asking about career and love, and I'm just wondering, and I guess I would ask them if there is any love issue that relates to their career, or is there any career issue that relates to love in their life, and try and drill down like that.
That's great. I think that's really insightful. That's a great way to approach, because, if the querent, it's possible that they're just like, no, I just want to know about my future, which is possible. But it's also possible that they might say, well, yeah, it's like, I've been in this job for a really long time, and my entire family depends on my income, but I'm really unhappy, and my partner doesn't want to get a job, and I've been like carrying it all for the past 5 years, and I'm just feeling like I really need a change. But if I make this change, will I lose my partner? That's a great way to elucidate that. And then down here in the chat, yeah, there's Cosette says, I would ask questions about the current situation. What's making her happy? What's not quite working? Excellent. And, then Lisa says, I think I may ask, are you looking for long-term or short-term love? And are you looking for a career or just a job to get by? That's really great, because those questions are going to help you determine how you're going to lay that spread out. Are we looking at like a short term next 6 months, or are we looking at a long term, like the next 5 to 10 years? Great. And then Priestess Shananda says, these are 2 questions that I get the most. So please know that what you are wanting to know is different for each person. So never think that these questions get boring. Right. I love that. Yeah. Reassuring the person. This is, never a bad time to ask about your all issues related to the planet Venus and attractions, love, money. And then Willow says, both of these are great things to want to look at, but is there one of those things that feels like it's pulling at you more, or do you feel that they're somehow related? That's fantastic too, Willow, because then you're really discerning whether it's going to be one spread you're going to do that's like a flowing spread about all issues related to attraction, or if you want to do 2 spreads, one where we look in on a specific relationship or potential relationship, and one where we want to look in on financial well-being. Yeah, and then Shananda echoes and says, and then to go into the situation, starting with what's been coming up for them regarding these two topics. Are they happy in this MO3? In this moment? I think that maybe this is moment. Yes, there it is. I scrolled down. Are they happy in this moment? Yeah, because that's one of the things, right, that we're looking for. We're not just looking to give a prediction about the future and say, well, here's what's going to happen. It's also, well, are you happy in with with where you're at? And if you wanted to change something, which would it be? Is it one or is it both? And again, that's going to give you your kind of plan for how you're going to approach the reading. I'm glad Lisa says this is fun. Good. I'm glad you're enjoying our exercise. All right, one more exercise. So I'm your querent, and I'm coming to say to you, will things ever get better between my family member and I? So will things ever get better? I'm asking you a yes or no question, but will things ever get better between my family member and I? How might you frame or approach that question? How might you say that question back or offer options to the querent about how you're going to answer that question? Will things ever get better between my family member and I? And I'll share with you that I had this exact question. Someone came and said, will things ever get better between this particular family member and I? And I said, yes, if you do these things, this will get better. And the querent was like, well, I'm not going to do those things. And I was like, well, okay, then you have your answer. The querent was like, I don't want to have, I was like, if you go and you reach out and you have a heart to heart and you offer some leeway and you explain where you've been coming from, or you just say, hey, listen, let's put this behind us. I don't want there to be anything between us, and I care too much about you. And the querent said to me, well, I don't want to do any of those things. And I was like, okay. It's kind of like, I don't really know where to go with that in this reading, but ultimately, the querent didn't do any of the things I suggested. And it kind of finally came down to me just saying, like, I don't really think that there's a way out of this situation unless you take action, because the reality is, if there's a bigger person to exist in a situation and you're the one who knows there needs to be a bigger person, you're the one who has to be that bigger person. You can't expect someone else to be the bigger person if you're not being the bigger person. So let's see what this says. This is a hard one, says Lisa. I need some time to think about this one. Cosette says, I would inquire about who the family member is. Is it someone close or distant? And under what kind of circumstances they engage. So that's great. That's kind of saying, like, is this the kind of thing where we're talking about, am I ever going to talk to my family member again who's estranged from me? Or are we talking about how am I going to deal with my uncle at Thanksgiving, right? And then Lisa says, now that you said that, I guess I might ask, are you willing to put time and work into making things better? Whew, that would be, yes, that's like right out the gate. Say, well, are you interested in putting in some time and effort to make things better in this situation? Because that's going to influence how you feel about that, is going to influence how we do this reading. Any others?
Yeah.
Good, Tara.
I think I apparently have a tendency to ask the questions back to the querent, but I would ask their opinion to start. I would say, is this something, just coming into this question right now, if you were to reflect on it, do you feel that there are things that could make it work? Because it's way too open-ended to ask the question that they've come with. They may be coming to you just furious at the moment about something, or there may be a lifelong history of abuse. I mean, there's this huge spectrum. I just don't feel I could dig into it without getting more information from them.
Yes, and Shananda says the same. And Lisa says, I like that you're asking their opinion about their question. I think this is a really good point.
Thank you, Judy.
And I think if it were me, probably the way I would say is I'd say, well, share with me, if you would, a little bit more about this relationship. Okay. Is there something that happened? Is there something that I should know before we begin? And that kind of opens the door a little ways. Another way one could approach it is like you said, to say, I think I need a little more context. Is this a longer term or shorter term situation? What makes you want to ask this question, right? What brings you to this question today? And then I think there's also a possibility to say, well, it sounds like, what we're really looking for here is that we'd first like, if the person is even shy to say that, you could say, well, then why don't we look at the dynamics of the relationship and let's see if there's anything that we need to really discuss about this relationship in this life or any other. And I'll always say to a client, I don't know if you believe in past lives, but I do. If you don't, that's fine. Just let me know. And I will be glad to, leave that out. But if you do believe, and 9 times out of 10, people are like, yeah, no, I totally believe in that. Because sometimes when I get into a relationship dynamic like this, there's a past life thing that comes up, or there's some other thing that actually helps to make a clearer explanation for the thing in this life that seems unexplainable. Like, I don't know, my cousin just stopped talking to me, or I don't know, my sister just stopped talking to me and I don't even know what I did, or whatever. You can say, well, you know what, let's look a little bit at the dynamics of this relationship. And you can easily do that with 4 cards, by the way. You can do a card for the querent, a card for the person in question, a card above, which indicates any past life or karmic influences, and a card below, which indicates any ancestral influences, or that card could also represent what's coming in the future. So that you've got, okay, like I see you and this person, and here's this card of, like the Hermit before, in the before times, and then down here in this time, there's maybe the 4 of Swords. Okay, it looks like in a past life, or, potentially in a past life, or even in the past in this life, one of you just really needed to pull away and be more of a hermit and be more kind of on their own. And that caused a rift or caused some pain. But the reality is that if you just, with that 4 of Swords, leave things alone and give that person their space, eventually they'll probably come around, or eventually they'll probably come back. And it may be that you would be able to then show, like, you are more of a Queen of Wands type of a person, very sociable, and you want that heartfelt connection. But over here, your, sister or your cousin or whoever, that card is more like of a Ace of Swords, more comfortable being alone, and doesn't really feel always like engaging in a social connection, or is feeling kind of separate from the rest of the family and doesn't really want to be part of things. So I'm just raising this because I think, there's lots of different approaches that we can take. And sometimes, especially with a relationship dynamic like that, you can pull it out of this lifetime and look at it through the lens of another lifetime. And that little bit of distance can help the person depersonalize the hurt that they're carrying around and see that bigger picture. Now, down in the comments, we've got a couple of things. Yeah, sometimes, even though it may be presented as it being about the other person, it may be that dealing with them and a decision that they must make is difficult but necessary. Exactly, says that's Shananda commenting. Sometimes it's not just about like, will things be okay between me and this person? Sometimes it's about, who do I need to be in order for things to be okay between me and this person? And sometimes it's about, why are things not okay between me and this person? Is that to my highest good? So with yes and no questions like that, you all have done so great to unpack some of the different layers and ways that we can approach. And I'm really excited at all of your contributions today to our little practice session here. I hope that this is going to help you when you're going forward as a reader to frame and reframe the questions that are brought to your table in such a way that you can actually really, get under the hood and help the person get the most out of their reading. Because at the end of the day, the quality of the answers you give are directly related to how much you're able to help the person understand why they're even there talking to you in the first place. So thank you so much for wonderful contributions today. And I'm so glad that this has helped tremendously, says Lisa. Thank you for this space, says Shananda. Thank you. Thank you. So glad that we did this. And I will be back again next month. It's going to be in December on the, let me just look at the date to make sure it's not Christmas, because all of a sudden I'm having a little particular moment here. No, so we will be together next on Sunday, the 26th for Tia and Tarot. And what we're going to do on that day is we're going to do, let's see. We're going to do our New Year's reading. We're going to do a collective reading together, bring your cards, and we're going to do a New Year's reading. And we're going to look in on our personal New Year's things that we need to know about 2022. And we're also going to offer each other some collective reflections for all of us as a temple. I hope everybody has a really great month, and we'll see you next month. I do want you to know that it's possible do you like this time of day? Is Sunday evenings still on last Sunday still good for you? If so, let me know. And if not, please let me know, because I'm making the schedule for next year and I'm just as happy to leave it exactly where it is. But if there's anybody who's like, well, this might be more convenient, I'm also happy to entertain suggestions, and we'll just see what we can do. All right. Have a good one, everyone. See you later.